The woman's name was Elena. She worked on a large cargo ship that traveled across the Atlantic Ocean. She was not a captain or a high-ranking officer. She was a junior navigation officer. For 3 years, she had done her job with quiet excellence. She studied the maps, checked the weather patterns, and helped steer the massive vessel through storms and calm seas alike. She loved the ocean. It was her first real home after a childhood filled with moving from one foster house to another. On the ship, she found order. She found purpose. She found a family among the crew. Her captain was a man named Captain Victor. He was a veteran of the seas with 30 years of experience. His voice was deep and rough, like waves crashing against rocks. He was respected, but he was also feared. He did not like change. He did not like new ideas. Most of all, he did not like women on his ship. He never said this directly, but his actions spoke louder than any words. He would give the male officers the important tasks. He would invite them to his private meetings. Elena was always told to stay behind and check the inventory or clean the navigation tools. Elena did not complain. She had learned long ago that complaining changed nothing. Instead, she worked harder. She arrived earlier than anyone else. She stayed later. She memorized every button, every screen, every emergency procedure on the bridge. She learned the ship's engine sounds so well that she could tell if something was wrong just by listening from her cabin. The other officers noticed. They respected her. But Captain Victor remained cold. One night, the ship was crossing a part of the ocean known for sudden storms. Elena was on the midnight shift. The sky was clear when she started her watch, but her instruments showed a strange pressure drop. She studied the radar. A storm was forming fast. Not a normal storm. A violent one. She calculated the speed and direction. If the ship continued on its current path, it would hit the center of the storm in less than 2 hours. She called Captain Victor on the bridge phone. He answered with a sleepy, irritated voice. She explained the situation clearly. She told him the data. She suggested a course correction of 15 degrees to the north. That small change would let the ship miss the worst of the storm. Captain Victor laughed. He told her she was young and nervous. He told her to stop watching the screen so closely and to trust his many years of experience. He said the weather report from the mainland showed clear skies. Then he hung up. Elena stood there, holding the phone. The radar screen blinked with angry red and yellow colors. The storm was growing faster than she had ever seen. She called the captain again. This time, he did not answer. She called his cabin directly. No answer. She sent a message through the ship's internal system. He ignored it. 20 minutes passed. The first strong wind hit the ship. It shook like a small toy. Elena grabbed the edge of the navigation desk. The male officer on duty with her, a man named Marco, looked at the radar and his face turned white. He said, "Elena, you were right. This is bad." He tried calling the captain. Still no answer. The wind grew louder. The rain started, not as drops, but as walls of water thrown against the windows. The ship began to tilt. Elena made a decision. She knew the rules. She knew that only the captain could change the ship's course without a full emergency meeting. But she also knew that if she waited any longer, the ship would be trapped in the storm's eye. Lives were at stake. 43 crew members. 43 families waiting for them to come home. She looked at Marco. "I am changing the course," she said. Marco opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He nodded. Elena's hands moved across the controls. She entered the new heading. 15 degrees north. The ship groaned but slowly began to turn. The storm still hit them, but now it was the edge of the storm, not the deadly center. For the next hour, Elena fought the waves. She adjusted the speed. She communicated with the engine room. She kept the ship steady. By the time Captain Victor finally walked onto the bridge, the worst had passed. The rain was still falling, but the violent winds had calmed. He looked at the radar. He looked at the new course. His face turned red with anger. "Who changed the course?" he shouted. His eyes landed on Elena. "Did you do this?" Elena stood straight. "Yes, Captain. The storm was going to hit us directly. I tried to warn you twice. You did not respond." Captain Victor stepped closer to her. His voice was low and shaking with rage. "You do not touch my ship's controls. You are a junior officer. You follow orders. You do not give them." I am noting this in your record. This act of disobedience will follow you for the rest of your career." The other officers on the bridge watched in silence. They knew Elena had saved them. They knew the captain was wrong. But no one spoke. Captain Victor was too powerful. They were afraid. Elena felt her heart sink. She had done the right thing, but she was being punished for it. The captain ordered her to leave the bridge. He told her to report to his office the next morning for a formal hearing. As she walked to her cabin, her hands were still shaking from the adrenaline. She sat on her small bed and stared at the wall. The ship was safe. The crew was safe. But her future on this ship was over. The next morning, Captain Victor held the hearing in his office. He had two other senior officers with him. They asked Elena questions, but the captain interrupted every time she tried to explain. He called her reckless. He called her disrespectful. He said she had no right to override a captain's authority, even in an emergency. At the end of the hearing, he told her that when the ship reached the next port, she would be removed from duty. Her contract would not be renewed. She would be sent home. Elena did not cry. She had cried enough in her childhood. She simply nodded and walked out. The other crew members heard the news. Many of them came to her quietly, one by one, to thank her. They knew the truth. But their thanks could not change the captain's decision. When the ship docked, Elena packed her small bag. She had been on the ship for 3 years. All her belongings fit into one duffel bag and one backpack. As she walked down the gangplank, she looked back at the ship. It had been her home. Now she was being sent away like a criminal. Captain Victor stood on the bridge, watching her leave. He did not wave. He did not say goodbye. He just turned away. Elena stood on the dock, alone. The port city was noisy and dirty. She had no family to call. She had no home to go back to. She had only her skills, her experience, and a record that now said she was disobedient. No other captain would want to hire her. No other ship would trust her. But Elena did something surprising. She did not look for another job on a ship right away. Instead, she sat down on a bench near the water, pulled out a small notebook, and began to write. She wrote about the storm. She wrote about the data she had seen. She wrote about the captain's refusal to listen. She wrote about the rule that said a junior officer could not act without permission, even to save lives. She wrote for 2 hours. Then she closed the notebook and walked to the nearest library. For the next 3 months, Elena lived in a small rented room above a fish market. The room smelled like salt and old fish. It had one window, one bed, and one table. She worked during the day at a dock warehouse, loading and unloading boxes. At night, she studied. She read every maritime law book she could find. She read about the rights of officers in emergencies. She read about past cases where junior crew members had acted against orders and been praised, not punished. She found 3 similar cases. In each one, the captain had been wrong, and the officer had been right. She also wrote letters. She wrote to the company that owned the ship. She wrote to the maritime authority in the ship's home country. She wrote to a newspaper that reported on shipping news. She sent her notebook pages, her radar data, and her detailed account of the storm. She asked for a fair review of her case. For weeks, no one answered. The fish smell filled her room. The money from the warehouse job was barely enough for food and rent. She lost weight. She looked tired. But she did not stop. Then, one morning, an envelope arrived. It was from the Maritime Authority. They wanted to meet with her. They had received her letter and her data. They had also received reports from other crew members on the ship who had quietly written letters of their own, describing how Elena had saved them. The authority had started an investigation into Captain Victor's behavior. Elena took a bus to the Maritime Authority's office. It was a gray building with small windows. She sat in a waiting room for 3 hours. When they finally called her name, she walked into a room with 5 people sitting behind a long table. They asked her questions for 4 hours. She answered everyone with calm honesty. She did not exaggerate. She did not cry. She simply told the truth. 2 weeks later, the decision came. Captain Victor was removed from his position. The investigation found that he had ignored clear danger, failed to respond to his crew, and punished an officer for saving the ship. He was given a fine and a suspension. Elena, on the other hand, was given a letter of commendation. The Maritime Authority wrote that her actions showed exceptional courage, quick thinking, and a deep commitment to the safety of the crew. But the story did not end there. The company that owned the ship offered Elena her job back. They also offered her a promotion. She would no longer be a junior officer. She would be the second in command on a new, larger ship. The captain of that new ship had read about her case and specifically asked for her. He said, "I want the officer who is not afraid to do the right thing, even when it is hard." Elena accepted the job. She packed her duffel bag and her backpack again. She left the small room of the fish market. She walked to the port and boarded her new ship. The new captain met her at the gangplank. He shook her hand and said, "Welcome aboard, First Officer Elena." She looked up at the bridge. The windows were clean and bright. The flag of the ship flapped in the wind. She climbed the stairs and stepped onto the deck. The ocean stretched out before her, endless and beautiful. She was home again. Document to life on the new ship was different from anything Elena had known before. Captain Reyes was a quiet man with kind eyes and a gentle voice. He did not shout. He did not need to. When he spoke, everyone listened because they respected him, not because they feared him. On Elena's first day, he took her to the bridge and showed her every system, every protocol, every secret of the ship. Then he said something she never forgot. He said, "Elena, a captain's job is not to give orders. A captain's job is to listen. The ocean speaks. The ship speaks. The crew speaks. If I stop listening, I stop being a captain. You saved your old ship because you listened when your captain did not. Never lose that." For the first few months, Elena felt like she was learning to sail all over again. Not because she lacked skill, but because she was finally allowed to use her skills fully. Captain Reyes encouraged her to speak up during meetings. He asked for her opinion on routes, on weather, on crew schedules. When she suggested a small change to the night watch rotation to reduce fatigue, he implemented it the next day. When she noticed a strange sound in the engine room and asked for an inspection, they found a loose bolt that could have caused a serious failure. Captain Reyes praised her publicly. He told the whole crew, "Elena hears things the rest of us miss. That is why she is my first officer, but the past was not so easy to leave behind." Elena still had nightmares about the storm. She would wake up in the middle of the night, her heart pounding, feeling the ship tilt even when the sea was calm. She would walk to the bridge at 2 in the morning just to check the radar. The crew on duty learned to expect her. They would hand her a cup of coffee and say, "All clear, First Officer." She would nod, look at the screens, and then go back to her cabin. Slowly, the nightmares became less frequent. The ocean began to feel safe again. 6 months into her new position, the ship received an emergency call. A smaller fishing boat had lost its engine in the middle of the Atlantic. The boat was drifting toward a rocky area known for shallow waters and hidden reefs. If the boat hit the rocks, it would break apart. There were 12 fishermen on board. They had sent out a distress signal, but their radio was weak. The signal was fading. Captain Reyes gathered the senior officers in the map room. "We are the closest ship," he said, "but we are still 6 hours away. The fishing boat will reach the rocks in 5 hours if it keeps drifting. We need to get there faster." The navigation officer spoke first. He suggested a direct route, full speed. That would take 5.5 hours, too late. Another officer suggested cutting through a narrow channel between 2 islands. That would save 1 hour, but the channel was dangerous. The rocks were not fully mapped. Many ships avoided it for that reason. Elena studied the charts. She had read about that channel before. A year ago, a scientific expedition had mapped parts of it using new sonar technology. She had saved the report in her personal notes. She ran to her cabin, grabbed her notebook, and came back. "There is a path through the channel," she said. "It is tight, but it is deep enough for our ship. If we take it, we can reach the fishing boat in 4 hours." Captain Reyes looked at her notes. He looked at the charts. He asked, "Are you sure, Elena?" She nodded. "I am sure, Captain." He trusted her. He gave the order. The ship turned toward the channel. The water grew narrow. On both sides, sharp rocks rose from the sea like teeth. The crew held their breath. Elena stood next to the captain, giving him directions every few seconds. 5 degrees to port. Now steady. Now 3 degrees to starboard. The ship moved slowly, carefully, like a giant walking through a small doorway. The rocks came so close that Elena could see the birds sitting on them. But the ship did not touch them. It passed through the channel and emerged into open water. They reached the fishing boat in 3 hours and 50 minutes. The 12 fishermen were standing on the deck, waving their arms. Their boat was just 2 miles from the rocky area. Elena helped coordinate the rescue. They threw lines to the fishing boat, pulled it close, and brought the fishermen aboard one by one. They were cold, tired, and scared, but they were alive. The last fisherman to come aboard was an old man with a white beard. He grabbed Elena's hand and kissed it. He said something in his language. The translator said, "He says you are an angel from the sea." Captain Reyes put his hand on Elena's shoulder. "No angel," he said. "Just a very good first officer." The rescue made news. A reporter from a shipping magazine came to the port to interview Elena. She sat in a small cafe near the dock, wearing her uniform, and told the story. She talked about the channel, the notes, the sonar report. She did not talk about Captain Victor or the old storm. The reporter asked her what made her a good officer. Elena thought for a moment. Then she said, "I was told to pull back once. Someone told me I did not belong. But the ocean does not care about what people say. The ocean only cares about what you do. So I did what needed to be done. And I kept doing it." The article was titled "Told to Pull Back" by her captain. She advanced and rose above it all. It spread quickly through the shipping world. Elena received letters from young women who wanted to become sailors. She received letters from older officers who said they were proud of her. She even received a letter from Marco, the officer who had been on the bridge with her during the old storm. He wrote, "I should have spoken up for you that night. I was a coward. You were brave. I am sorry. And I am glad you found a captain who sees your worth." Elena kept the letter in her notebook, next to the sonar report and the storm data. She did not hold anger toward Marco. She understood fear. She had felt it herself many times. The difference was that she had chosen to act anyway. And that choice had changed everything. 2 years later, Captain Reyes announced his retirement. He was old and wanted to spend time with his grandchildren. The company needed a new captain for the ship. They held interviews. Many experienced officers applied. But the company chose Elena. She was 31 years old. She would be one of the youngest captains in the fleet and one of the few women to command a cargo ship on the Atlantic route. On the day of her promotion, the crew gathered on the deck. The sun was bright. The water was blue and calm. Captain Reyes took off his own captain's hat and placed it on Elena's head. It was too big. It fell over her eyes. Everyone laughed. Elena laughed too. She took the hat off, adjusted the inside band, and put it back on. It fit perfectly now. She stood at the front of the ship and looked at her crew. Some of them had been with her since her first day as first officer. Others were new. They all looked at her with trust in their eyes. She thought about the girl who had grown up in foster homes, moving from one strange house to another, never belonging anywhere. She thought about the young officer who had been humiliated and sent away for doing the right thing. She thought about the small room above the fish market and the long nights of writing letters. Then she thought about the present. The ship was hers now, not because someone gave it to her, but because she had earned it. Wave by wave, storm by storm, right decision by right decision. She gave her first order as captain. It was a simple order. "Let us go home." The crew smiled. The engines rumbled to life. The ship pulled away from the dock and sailed toward the horizon. Elena stood on the bridge, her hands resting on the controls. The ocean stretched out before her, endless and beautiful. She was not afraid anymore. She was exactly where she belonged. And she had risen above it all.